Hi, I'm Dr. Paul Louis Metzger, and I'm the director of New Wine, New Wineskins. Welcome to New Wine Tastings, where every week we'll have an opportunity to engage people from diverse backgrounds, all in the attempt to build relational bridges through Jesus in contemporary culture. We are desirous of the opportunity to engage in deep and meaningful ways, and we're really thrilled and excited to have you with us. Hello, I'm Paul Louis Metzger, the director of New Wine, New Wineskins, and this is New Wine Tastings. Thank you for joining us today, and my guest is Dr. Karen Fancher, my colleague at Multnomah University and Seminary, and she's one of the leaders with Dr. Greg Birch in what we call the MAGDJ. And I actually just saw or actually heard an advertisement for the program on OPB the other day, and it was really cool listening to NPR or what have you, and then finding this clip, this little advertisement for your program.
Yeah, it's really exciting to realize that there's people in the public sphere all around who are trying to say, how do we engage from the lens of faith, the really complex issues in our world? And so it's fun to have another forum to share about our program. And so
MAGDJ, what is that? It's not disc jockey. What is that referring to?
First of all, we kind of like that, MAGDJ. It makes me feel almost cool to be a part of it, right? But it's a Master of Arts in Global Development and Justice Studies. And we realize that as followers of Jesus, that we want to engage in the world, but we want to do so thoughtfully with deep understandings of context. And so global development, we want to go to the places in the world where there has been perhaps war, complexity, inner cities in America. God calls us, Jesus calls us to go to those who are marginalized, to care for the poor, and in that sense to realize our poverty, that we need Him, that we need one another. And so we're looking through that lens of how do we be effective practitioners, that we engage in communities in ways that show the heart of Jesus, that do it with high professionalism, with mutuality, to come as learners. And the word justice, we're thinking that Jesus puts all things right. He makes relationships right.
He makes whole.
He makes it whole, shalom. And so right relationship with God, with others, with creation, with ourselves. And that means that we understand, that we give people voice, that even the ways that we engage in development are honoring those that we seek to come alongside of, rather than from a place of power and setting our own agendas. So we're learning all the time, but it's really a delight to be a part of.
I really love the emphasis in the program with MAGDJ, with the Global Justice Development Thrust. It's really about equity, it's about justice, it's about being on the same level, not over the top toward those you go to serve. You actually to work with them, not to somehow look at them as objects of your charity. I mean, charity historically was a good word, but it's taken on all kinds of negative associations. But this is about really community development, community engagement. And like you said, we learn our own poverty as we engage people in poverty, that it's not you come in as the experts to think through Paulo Freire's language. And I know Dr. Birch and I both love Paulo Freire's work, and I'm sure you do as well. But it's the idea that we're learners and we're not experts, and these are our partners in the work we're doing.
Right, so we're called to walk with one another and to strengthen one another, to love one another, right? Love your neighbors yourself, but that doesn't mean to set agendas for the other. And sometimes when we see a need, we think we know how to fix it. And when we have resources, we assume that we are the experts, but we don't understand the dynamics in that context, the skills that are unique in that context, the priorities of those communities, and the ways that we can learn from them what they've already been doing. And so often historically development has been people with money or expertise coming in and trying to do for, and there's a power disequilibrium there. We often miss both the sense of what God is doing in us and in the communities, as well as what's effective and sustainable. So we're learning, and in that I think that's where witness begins, by the ways that we honor one another, love one another, walk with one another in the complexities. So it's a continual journey.
Right, and you had mentioned Shalom a few minutes ago, and you're actually going to be leading a group on a Holy Land tour. And actually registration, the deadline is about now. It's like just, 2 days from now? And could you tell us a bit about this, what I'm calling Holy Land tour? It's not a typical Holy Land tour, and you're not going there as tourists ultimately. You're really going from an inquisitive perspective to hear from people of various walks of life and, again, perspectives. Could you speak to what this is going to be about and what you're hoping to do?
Well, first of all of my journey in seminary, I thought I would love to go to see the context of the scripture and to see where Jesus walked, and never had the opportunity. And then teaching in this program, I was asked if I would help to organize a course and a study tour to Israel and Palestine. And so as we were organizing that, we thought, what would be the outcomes? What do we really want to achieve? And I have a friend who said tens of thousands of Christians come and take pictures of stones and leave every year, and they never see the people of the land or understand the dynamics that they're facing. And as followers of Jesus, realizing that 2% of the population are Christians, and they're living in a really complex place where they're seeking to be people of peace and to represent the heart of Jesus. And what can we learn from them? How can we encourage them? How can we learn from the broader context? So we've designed this tour just to get glimpses, and in a short amount of time, we're not going to pretend that we're going to master that context either. But we start and we work with the Holy Land Institute that they're experts in the land, and they're going to teach us about the historical context of the gospel. So we'll be in Jerusalem, we'll be in the Galilee, we'll be in Bethlehem, and we'll learn about the dynamics, the historical dynamics, the cultural dynamics that were taking place in the time where Jesus walked this earth. And then we'll read the words of Jesus in those contexts and reflect and ask God to teach us, what does it mean for me today to apply these words to my life? And how can I learn from those who are seeking to do that in the current context of Israel? And so we will, when we read, blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called children of God, to think, what does it really mean to be a peacemaker in a challenging situation? It's not passivity, nor is it aggression, it's engagement. And what does redemptive engagement look like? What does humble engagement look like? And so then the second part of the tour is we meet with some really strategic people in that context who tell us what it means for them to be people of peace, and to learn from them, and then to come back here and think about, how do I live that out? And I'm still learning that. It's a challenging trip, but it's really, I think, quite a profound experience.
So again, you'll be going to different contexts, different sites. I don't know if you wish to speak on some of those locations, perhaps not at this juncture, but I understand that you'll be engaging people from various perspectives on even current cultural issues and challenging issues there in the Holy Land.
Yeah, and we don't go with a political agenda, but we go to understand, what are the dynamics that you face today? What does this mean for you? How do we walk
Jewish
with you?
people, Palestinian people, I'm assuming, Jewish, Christian, Muslims, people, and not just to take pictures of stones.
Right.
There's a place for that.
Right. There's a beautiful place for that, yeah.
To, in a sense, gain a snapshot, an insight into people as they share and you're listening.
Yeah.
The people who are there, living there 24/7, 365 days a year.
And what I've learned, and we just get very small glimpses, but people don't fit in boxes. And we often have this narrative of what we think Palestinian is, or the absolute way that Israelis believe as far as political convictions or engagement. And we see things like, we won't engage on this trip, but there's an organization that takes children from Gaza and from Syria and from Iraq and helps them get medical care in Israel. Do we hear about that? Do we hear about these barriers that are being crossed? Do we find people who are willing to hear the story of the other? There's an organization called Musalaha that seeks to build peace in the Holy Land, and they take people from Palestinian background, from an Israeli background, and they hear one another's stories. And the director of that program said, when they hear each other's stories, they think, well, now you'll understand, and of course you'll agree with me. And they realize, this person has a deeper understanding of my personal reality, and they may still hold different convictions, and now we need to learn to walk together.
Yeah, how to walk together.
Yeah, and to see this person as a real person, not with malice, but facing challenges in their own situation, in their own context. And then when we meet with people who are followers of Jesus who say, we need to love one another as brothers and sisters first and have our other identities second.
That's so hard for us, isn't it?
We're learning to do that. And it doesn't mean that other identity isn't important,
right.
But it means that we first seek to be people of peace, to love one another, to understand one another, and then to walk with one another. And I'm challenged when I come back. I think, do I step into the context of the other and really seek to understand their stories here in our complex, challenging context right now? And,
Absolutely. And, when we think about culture wars, whether it's here or there, the tensions and, conflicts, how to bring about some measure of peace, shalom, in the midst of conflicts. We've talked about this with, the various peace initiatives. What's required to really make peace between people? Certainly this understanding, Atticus Finch says, if you really want to understand someone, you have to step inside their shoes and see life from their vantage point, and so on and so forth. To Kill a Mockingbird is where he is quoted as saying that principal character. What are some of the things that go into play when we think about reconciliation? What's required? And we've talked about this on several occasions.
Well, I think first of all, although we talk about peace, we need to talk about just peace, that people feel that they are treated justly, that they have voice at the table, that there is some sense of mutuality, even though there are also differences and challenges that are taking place. There needs to be motivation on both sides that the status quo is not working and a willingness to compromise. And there needs to be a sincere listening to the concerns of the others, that both people are at the table. Although we need structures, and there's political process that's taking place right now, I really look at the foundation of peace takes place in relationships and in communities. I've had the opportunity to go to South Sudan several times, and they've signed many peace accords, and they don't hold because there's not yet still trust within the communities. And so there can be a signed peace, there can be a structural agreement, but in order to really have peace that's not an absence of violence, but that is actually an ability to live in community together, takes the human component of hearing the stories of others, of engaging the others, and also realizing we're totally independent. We are truly interdependent. Sorry, my concerns can never be resolved without the other person also being well. You can gain. I just heard a powerful analogy that there are reasons to be angry and bitter. And if you look at the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, the Israelis, they're very right to existence. Some people think they should be blotted off the earth. And for the Palestinians, we have no state, we have no land. So they're both feeling that they are being denied existence and voice and security. And so when we hear how deep these issues are, I think it's really important to hear both sides, to have compassion for also the historical traumas that both sides have experienced, and to acknowledge and respect those. And if you could have structural peace that is functional, and yet if there is still tension and sense of marginalization, it's not a relational peace or a sustainable peace. And I think that's much deeper, and I want to learn that personally, how to walk as a person of peace, and then to encourage others in that process. So we need both. We need the structural, but we need the personal.
You had mentioned earlier that you go to South Sudan, and you do a lot of work in the area of reconciliation, trauma studies, and the like. And if you could speak to what you've learned about peacemaking from others there, because talk about conflicts, talk about trauma, and it puts to shame some of our conflicts, doesn't it? That we have a hard time working through. I'm sure you've learned a lot from the people there, the resilience in the midst of trauma. But could you speak to that and what you are doing here at Multnomah University in the MAGDJ program, specifically in that domain, if I'm not mistaken?
Sure. So we've started a peace-building emphasis within our program because we realize you can do development, and you can help there to be economic development and education and clean water and many aspects that help a community to flourish. But if there's underlying tensions, then the vulnerability consists. Or if people don't have voice, then eventually access to schooling, education, all of those things can be compromised again. That what led to an inequity of access to the ability to flourish is often at some level conflict. And so if we want to come in, often as development practitioners, we come in after a conflict, after the Rwandan genocide, and now you want to try to help. And I had students actually ask me and say, why aren't we addressing issues before they explode? How are we helping to strengthen communities before?
Karen, you had mentioned earlier about your work in South Sudan and your experiences with just learning from people of, traumatized situations.
Right.
And, talk about trauma, talk about resilience, talk about people being able to work through that toward powerful transformation and being transforming agents. That's something I know that's really on your heart and on your imagination. And if you could speak to that, and also speak to the work you're doing in the MAGDJ on that, because you do a program initiative in peace studies, correct?
Yeah. So we built a peace-building emphasis into our program, and we did that because we realized that if you bring development to a community, sometimes you can even play into dynamics of tension, that some people get resources, some don't. Or if we don't realize the deeper underlying tensions, that we can maybe have a short-term impact, but not help to address longer-term needs. And that's where we really have to listen to communities, to partner with them. There are places for a neutral outside voice. We most certainly won't pretend that we understand all the dynamics. I think that's a really important piece as well. And when we talk about trauma, it's really easy to look at the others, those traumatized people. And I think what I'm learning is I've met some of the most gracious and resilient people, especially in South Sudan. It doesn't mean that trauma hasn't had an impact. The situations they have faced over many years of violence and displacement takes a toll, and we want to be aware of that and sensitive to that. And
you're not going in there for photo ops to in any way trying to exploit their trauma to come back with that, to say, here's what we can learn from it.
And that we can solve it, and we are the saviors. No, but to say, but we want to be more informed so that we can be supportive, holistically supportive. There might be pieces that we can bring to the table, we will also learn from. And I think that's so important, to learn what's been effective within the communities and where there might also be gaps or needs where others can walk with. So I think when I think about trauma, it's easy to look at people who have gone through really complex, long-term, painful situations as helpless. And part of trauma is you feel overwhelmed, you feel like you have no agency, that you can't address the situation. So to recognize the strengths within the community is actually healing. And to recognize the voices for peace are those who have experienced the violence. In South Sudan, I met people who were so gracious and courageous to take people into their homes when that could place them in danger, that have been willing to reach out to the other when their community was very opposed or fearful, and to really seek to come together and worship God when they're from opposing sides of the conflict. And so I think we should always go as learners. We're not walking in those depths of tension. And as I teach, I teach from the perspective of researching, listening to voices, continuing to learn, and to walk with. But this impact of trauma is not to be discounted, nor are we to make assumptions.
And you had mentioned as well in a conversation that, there is what is called today redemptive violence. And you were talking about the need to move beyond these polar opposition poles of what? Of being victimized or being about redemptive violence, that there's this transformation of conflict, that's what we need to be about. Could you speak to that?
Yeah, so in the field of trauma studies, they'll often talk about this victim-aggressor cycle, where a person who has experienced deeply traumatic events, violence, displacement, whatever that might be, can start to have the identity as a victim and feel helpless and withdraw or lose voice. And that's a dangerous and defeating place to be. Or there's this narrative where you have to fight back to set things right, and that it's actually redemptive and appropriate to use violence. And if we listen to our current narratives today, you'll see how we justify violence. When you hear of somebody doing something to the other, we need to get in there. Internationally, that it doesn't mean there's not places for defense and appropriate responses of governments, but we often think that violence is going to be redemptive and solve the issue, and it really can't. And so we need to find a third way, and the third way is to be able to find your agency, your strength, to be able to grieve, to be able to process what has happened, to be able to find ways to engage that are redemptive, and to find a new way forward. It's not passivity, nor is it aggression, but it is engagement that is working towards transformation. That sounds really ideological, very ideal, and not very aspirational, maybe, rather than something that we can actually do. But it's small steps that continue to build. And I've just seen people that have really amazed me with the ways they're willing to listen, bring people to the table, try to find projects that they can do together within their communities, mutual interests, seeking to hear narratives, and it's powerful and it's humbling.
And what you're saying is certainly, inspirational, it's aspirational, it's small steps, and it has been done.
Yeah.
I mean, it's been done by the Lord Jesus.
Yes.
And it's not like he's just our ideal. He calls us to follow him. And the Sermon on the Mount is all about what you're talking about, and turning the other cheek, loving your neighbor, praying for those who persecute you, be like your heavenly Father. It's what he lived. You see it in King with the whole thrust of beloved community. You see it in Dr. John Perkins with his Christian Community Development Association work and his 3 R's of relocation, reconciliation, redistribution. It can be done, it has been done, and it will be done.
It will be done.
Karen,
and it's our place of witness, where we love when it's costly, where we step into that which is difficult, where we, and I love Miroslav Wolf, where he talks about exclusion and embrace, where we exclude that which is destructive, but we embrace the person, right? Where we speak truth, but we speak it in love, and we still see this person with a narrative, with concerns, with reasons that they're in the position they're in, and then we seek to bring catalysts of change together. And I really believe that sometimes we use our narrative as our identity of believers in opposition rather than in engagement, and that's really dangerous, even to a lot of the current context that we live in. We're speaking of fear of the other, and as a follower of Jesus, I shouldn't be afraid.
An imperfect love casts out fear, but is cast out by fear, but a perfect love casts out fear.
Yeah.
Karen, we're at the end of our time, but could you just speak to how someone can find out about the Holy Land Tour work and that you're doing, and it might not just be this year, but in future years, and then also the peace studies emphasis in the MAGDJ. Could you just speak briefly to that, like how can people find out more? Absolutely.
So we have a couple days if there's someone, and we have a couple openings, so if there's someone that would like to join us, they can email me at kfancher@multnomah.edu. If you're someone that wants to learn to come humbly, to listen, and to reflect on the words of Jesus, then you're welcome. And if you'd like to learn about the MAGDJ and our peace-building emphasis, you can go to the Multnomah webpage. You can just type in Global Development and Justice Studies. You'll find a link. You can contact Greg Birch or myself. You can contact admissions. We'd love to speak with you. It's always beautiful to see the people that come to the table and that want to engage these issues. So.
Yeah, it's been great. I love working with you and Greg in the program and having an opportunity to engage these phenomenal colleagues, these students who come in with such passions for justice and community development work. So, Karen, thanks so much. I learned so much from our interaction and in so many different contexts. And I'm Paul Lewis Metzger. This is New Wineskins, and our emphasis on new wine tastings. Thank you for having a taste of new wine today with our colleague, Dr. Karen Fancher. Blessings to you, Karen, and blessings to all of you.
Thanks, Paul.